Thank you for the opportunity to praise you, to sing a brand new song, to dance before your throne. Thank you for the opportunity to praise you. Thank you for this chance to praise. And I will praise you when the sun is shining brightly in my life. I'll praise you when the rain is pouring down. With each morning, each breaking day, new mercies I do see. Thank you for this chance to praise. And I will praise you when the sun is shining brightly in my life. I'll praise you when the rain is pouring down. With each morning, with each breaking day, no mercies I do see. And I thank you for this chance. Thank you for this chance. Thank you for this chance. Thank you for the chance. I thank you for this chance to praise. I sure do. Thank God for this opportunity to worship, to give his name praise, glory, and honor. He has been good to me, and I'm grateful for his graciousness on my behalf. I hope that you are the same. Hope that you've had a good week. Since Sunday, a whole lot has happened, and God is continuing to show himself strong on our behalf. Do what you do. Do what you do, Faith Deliverance. You know how to say some hellos to everybody. Greet your neighbor, as we say at Faith Deliverance. Go out of your way, out of your seat, and greet your neighbor. Take the time to say hello to some folks whose names you see down there in the comments and in the reactions. You see a name, say a hello. Do that for me. Let's pray. Father, we're grateful to you for this absolutely beautiful day that you've given us, this opportunity to celebrate life, this opportunity to celebrate salvation, and this opportunity to celebrate emancipation. You've been kind and merciful to us as individuals and as a people. And so today we want to say thank you. I pray, Father, that every song that we sing will be a sweet melody in your ear, that our praise will be a sweet fragrance in your nostrils. I pray, Lord, that what we do today will bring glory and honor to you. And even as we look at our history and we attempt to look through all of the coverings and all of the craziness and the half-truths, I pray, Father, that you will give us the wisdom to take the knowledge that's out there and to use that knowledge to educate others, educate ourselves and our children, and let it help propel us forward. Because you've been good to African Americans in this country. You've been good to black people in this country. Despite what we're dealing with right now, Father, we know that your hand is still in the middle of it. And you are not finished yet what you plan to do on our behalf. And so we say thank you. We say thank you. I pray, Lord, for every person who is joining us, who is dealing with issues of illness. I pray for those who may be in the hospital right now and for their family members who are in the hospitals. I pray, Lord, that you will give peace. I pray that you will bring healing. I pray, Father, that you will bring a cure. I pray, Lord, that you will bring vaccines. I pray, Lord, that your kingdom will come and your will be done right here on earth the way that it is done in heaven. We love you so much, Father. And please teach us how to love you the more. We are grateful to you. In Jesus' name we do pray. Everybody saying amen and amen. Yeah. Well, I'm going to one of my favorites. I hope I have this set right. He is the King of Kings. Oh, he is the Lord of Lords. He's the great I am. He's the Holy One. Let's see what we got. Yeah. Sounds about right. hands together. He is the Holy One. You know, we'll mess around and get happy up in here. Yes, sir. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Celebration of Juneteenth. Hey, I'm free. Yes, I am. Hey, I'm free. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm free. Oh, 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 oh. I'm free. Oh, thank you, Lord. Oh, praise the Lord. Hallelujah. I'm free. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. I'm free. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. I'm free. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. I'm free. Thanks be unto God. Freedom. Freedom in America. Freedom in the spirit. Thank God for freedom. Woo! Yeah. Well, y'all, it's Juneteenth, and we are celebrating Freedom Day for Black people in America. Freedom Day. And while we all know that everything is not as it should be, thanks be unto God, it's better than it used to be. Way better than it used to be. I want to share a couple of things with you on this evening. I have some videos that I want you to take a look at, and then just a little bit of information that I want to share to make certain that we are clear about some things in America right now. Let's just go to the videos. Let's start there.
The history books have glorified Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation for freeing slaves, but if we're being real, it only applied to slaves who lived near Union lines, where they could flee his or her plantation or take advantage of opportunities in the North. Around 500,000 Black people managed to do this. These Black people freed themselves. Juneteenth, or June 19th, is a powerful moment in Black history, dating back to June 19, 1865, the day Union soldiers led by Major General Gordon Granger went into Galveston, Texas, with news that the Civil War was over and Texas's 250,000 slaves were now officially free. Yes! 1865? That's a whole 2.5 years after Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. In those 2 years, Black people's newfound freedom was rejected by white people. But General Granger bossed up and issued an order to the people of Texas, proclaiming all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. And the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. And Juneteenth was born. Our Independence Day. Our July 4th. Of course, it wasn't black and white like that. We weren't free. They just announced it. This new freedom sparked a violent backlash from white people. Surprise! Former Confederate soldiers, still in uniform and with guns, intimidated Black people, continuing a new form of slavery. They did this by murdering, lynching, and harassing the freed slaves. Hashtag Reconstruction era. But we are a resilient people. None of their intimidation tactics could stop our ancestors from accepting and celebrating their freedom. And they celebrated defiantly, because you know white people were hating. The first public Juneteenth event took place in 1866. Former slaves read the Emancipation Proclamation, something pretty gangster to do in the 1860s South. They also sang spirituals and played games. The freed men and women of Texas took their celebrations wherever they went. Los Angeles, Oakland, Seattle, Chicago, Virginia, you name it. By the 20th century, the Jim Crow laws were in full effect. Freedom started to feel like a foreign concept, and Juneteenth celebrations didn't happen as often. But the fight to freedom had to continue. The Poor People's March of 1968 brought new life into the holiday. In 1980, Texas recognized it as a state holiday. And in 1997, Congress recognized June 19th as Juneteenth Independence Day. It's been over 150 years since the first Juneteenth. Isn't it time Juneteenth became a national holiday? It could be the blackest holiday ever. Barbecues, music, dancing, a celebration of being free Black men and women. June 19th is not just about freedom, but the fight of our ancestors, the determination, and the consideration that one day their children, their children's children, and their children's children's children would be free.
Yeah, The Root is a good magazine that you may want to subscribe to. They have interesting articles and information, videos that you can find online about all of this. And while we're talking about the holiday itself, the holiday springs from the Emancipation Proclamation. If you grew up and attended school in the 60s, 70s, 80s, I dare say the 90s, you probably never heard anything about Juneteenth. And what you heard about the Emancipation Proclamation was that was the day that Abraham Lincoln freed all the slaves. It didn't exactly go down like that. So I want you to take a look at this, and then let me just share a few things with you. Yeah.
The history books have glorified Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation for freeing slaves.
Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. Stuff happens.
My name is Todd Brewster. This is History in 5, and I'm going to tell you 5 things about Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. At the outset of the Civil War, Lincoln made it clear that what he felt the nation was fighting for, the mission of the war, was to reunite the states. After a while, the mission of the war also included the end of slavery, but that took some time. In fact, the question of slavery was a complicated one in the mid-19th century. Many people believed that slavery itself was wrong, but they did not believe that equality should flow from an end of slavery. In fact, science itself claimed the belief that the white race was inherently superior to the black race. Lincoln felt the best outcome to the Civil War, the way to remove this crisis from the American landscape, was to recolonize the black Americans back to Africa, where they had come from. He was pessimistic about the black and white races ever being able to live together in this country. Lincoln was very much a creature of the Enlightenment. He believed in reason. He tended in his religious feelings to be an agnostic. Even the way that Lincoln conducted the war, the way the war strategy was established, showed a belief in reason. The strategies were built around the training that the generals had had at West Point, which was really French. It was driven by French war theory and established by a European named Jomini. And so he believed in what their approach was, which was driven primarily by reason. In fact, those theories fell apart in the Civil War. They no longer had the same success that they had had in Europe for a multitude of reasons. But as this happened, Lincoln himself began to lose faith in reason as a method for conducting war strategy. He really moved more to the notion of a strong, brutal warfare, as we saw conducted in Atlanta with Sherman much later in the war. When we think of Lincoln, we think of him as the great emancipator, as if this was an easy decision for Lincoln to free the slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation was in fact difficult for Lincoln to do. He worried that it would not necessarily hasten the end of the war. It might make the war more vigorously prosecuted. In fact, it might lead to the South employing the freed slaves in their effort in order to gain a bigger advantage. So Lincoln writes the Emancipation Proclamation in July of 1862. Then in September, he issues it as what they call the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, a kind of threat, really, that says unless the rebel states return to the fold, unless they stop their fighting, that he is going to free the slaves in those rebel states. Then it sits on his desk for months. By the middle of December, no one is sure whether the threat of the Emancipation Proclamation, which Lincoln had determined would be actually issued on January 1, 1863, will actually be carried through. And on the night before, on December 31st, New Year's Eve, 1862, he stays up all night. And finally, on the January 1st, 1863, he does indeed sign the Emancipation Proclamation. One of the reasons that the Emancipation Proclamation was so difficult to write is that it contained many paradoxes, ironies, and contradictions. Lincoln was freeing the slaves in the states in the rebellious South, states over which he at that point had no control. He was not freeing slaves in the North, in the border states, where slavery could continue despite the Emancipation Proclamation. Furthermore, he could not free slaves constitutionally. According to the Constitution, the slaves were property, were personal property. He landed on a justification that was to use the Emancipation Proclamation as an act of war. To him, this was justification to free the slaves and thereby undermine the war effort in the South. But this created a paradox. The Emancipation Proclamation did not carry the force of law. It only carried a direction of policy conducted by his generals and his armies as they moved throughout the South. So theoretically, the slaves could have been re-enslaved once the war was over. Of course, with the constitutional amendment passed in 1865 to end slavery, that question became moot. One of the other outcomes of the Emancipation Proclamation as a tactic of war was that it unleashed a whole new population into the war itself. Not only did the proclamation free the slaves, it also encouraged them to enlist in the army. At the same time that many of the white northern soldiers were losing their enthusiasm for the battle, these new black soldiers arrived to put new enthusiasm and new fire into the army itself, resulting in new successes and ultimately victory.
Now that's a lot of information. Some of it is probably surprising to a lot of us. And so let me just talk a little bit. Just bear with me. Bear with me. First thing I want to tell you is that while the North the northern states did not enter the war to end slavery. That's not why they went into the war. Lincoln actually just wanted to preserve the Union. While that was the thinking of the northern states, the South fought the war specifically to preserve slavery. And in the reading of almost every letter of secession from every state that wrote a letter of secession saying that they were leaving the United States, the states put in them specifically that they were fighting to preserve slavery, and that was their intent, and that abolition, the folks who wanted to end slavery, was their grievance. That's why they were upset. Let's see, second thing I want to tell you. At the onset of the conflict, Lincoln insisted that the war was not about freeing the South's slaves, but about preserving the Union. And that was really the only way that he could get the North to go with him on this. There were 4 border slave states, Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri. They remained on the Union side, and many others in the North also opposed abolition. As a matter of fact, one of his generals told him that if he freed the slaves, that he would have an abandonment in the army from the North, because that's not what they were fighting for. Let's see, when the abolitionists criticized Lincoln for not coming out with a stronger emancipation policy, this is what he replied, that he valued saving the Union over everything else. Quote, "My paramount objective in this struggle is to save the Union, and is not either to save or destroy slavery." That's what he wrote in an editorial in a newspaper in August of 1862. Quote, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leave the others alone, I would do that." Thank you, Mr. Lincoln. Let's see, what else do I want to share with you? Let me just read a few portions of the actual Emancipation Proclamation that was written by Mr. Lincoln. It says that on the first day of January in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, that the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be thenceforward and forever free. And the executive government of the United States, including the military and the naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no acts or act to repress such persons or any of them in any effort to make for their actual freedom. Let me add to that, also included in this document, the Emancipation Proclamation. Quote, "And I hereby enjoin upon the people so declared to be free," that's the black folk, "to abstain from all violence, unless in necessary self-defense. I recommend to them that in all cases when allowed, that they labor faithfully for reasonable wages. And I further declare and make known that such persons of suitable condition will be received into the armed services of the United States to garrison forts, positions, stations, and other places, and to man vessels of all sorts in said service." In other words, they can join the military and help fight against the South. Let's see. Also in this document, Mr. Lincoln says that he is doing this as a fit and necessary war measure for suppressing the said rebellion. And he lists the states that were in rebellion. These are the places where people were declared to be free, according to the Emancipation Proclamation. Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, except for some of its parishes, including the city of New Orleans. Folk in New Orleans were still slaves. The rest of the state, y'all can come fight with us. Mississippi, of course, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, except for the 48 counties in that portion of Virginia that split off and became West Virginia. The folk in West Virginia who were slaves and decided to go with the North, those black folks were still slaves, even after this writing. By the way, in Virginia, let's see if I can get this right. There were counties in Virginia that were siding with the North, the great Commonwealth of Virginia. They included Berkeley, Accomack, Northampton, Elizabeth City, York, Princess Anne, and Norfolk, including the cities of Norfolk and Portsmouth. All of these parts, accepted parts, were left exactly, this is how it reads. Which accepted parts are for the present left precisely as if this proclamation were not issued. In other words, those of us in Hampton Roads, those of you, I was in South Carolina, I was free, right? Yeah. Those of you in Hampton Roads were remaining, your ancestors were remaining in slavery because the people in your state were with the Union, and so you could not be free. Let me read for you the General Order number 3 that Major General Gordon Granger actually read in Galveston, Texas on June 19th, 1865. Let me preface this by letting you know that after the capture of New Orleans in 1862, slave owners in Mississippi and Louisiana and other parts of the eastern United States, they had been migrating over to Texas. They were doing that to escape the Union Army's reach. What they did basically was, because they knew that the Emancipation Proclamation had been issued, what they did was grab their slaves and move almost 200,000 slaves, marched them over to Texas, which was the edge of the United States at the time, trying to get as far away from the Union soldiers as possible, because if the Union soldiers got to them, then they'd have to tell the slaves they were free. They had been free for 2 years, since January 1st of 1863. So on June 19th of 1865, 2.5 years later, General Gordon Granger finally caught up with the folk in Texas and read this in their hearing, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with the proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between an employer and a hired employee." In other words, you're not a slave anymore, you're an employee. "The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness either there or anywhere else." In other words, you had to stay where you are and keep working. By the time that Granger had assumed command in Texas and read this, the Confederate capital in Richmond, Virginia had already fallen. And the executive to whom he was referring, meaning Abraham Lincoln, had been assassinated in April of 1865. Shall we continue? Some of the landowners throughout the South where this was read coordinated with the Union troops to wait until the end of the harvest to tell the slaves they were free so that they could get the harvest done, and then they'd let them go. Yeah. Anyway, those who acted on the news to this newfound freedom did so at their own peril. Between 1865 and 1930, there were more than 450 lynchings recorded in Texas, while the Texas Rangers often stood aside as the lynchings were being carried out. There were absolutely wonderful results. I just want us to understand that it wasn't like I was told when I was growing up, that Abraham Lincoln, when he was a boy, saw this black child in slavery and saw his master mistreating him and decided that one day he was going to become president. He was going to free all the slaves. It ain't true. If he could have left it like it was, he would have. Enough said. Actually, in my reading and research, and something I knew but I was able to find, he purported gathering up all of the blacks in the United States and sending them all back to Africa, because he did not feel like blacks and whites could live together peaceably. So he wanted to send us back where we came from. Hence Liberia. Look it up. Let's see. Some of the good things that came out of it. It's not all bad news. We can tell right now, like the fact that, you're not working in cotton fields and you get paid for what you do, even if you may not get paid what you're worth. Nations like Britain and France that had previously considered supporting the Confederacy because they really thought the Confederacy was going to win, and if Lincoln had not freed the slaves so that they could join the Union soldiers in fighting, the South probably would have won, because they had the advantage of having that free labor force to do everything that needed to be done in terms of making the guns and the weapons and making sure the troops got fed and their uniforms got mended and their bodies were taken care of. The slaves were taking care of all of this stuff. And so, Britain and France, because they wanted to have an advantage, they were trying to get on the side of whoever they thought were going to win. But when the Emancipation Proclamation came along and all the slaves started trying to get to the North, and then they started working with the Union Army, they saw the turning of the tide in the war, and they backed off and decided not to work with the South as they continued to try to push the issue of slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation also, it paved the way for the abolition of slavery in the United States, because it did not abolish slavery in the United States. It abolished slavery in the Confederate States that were fighting against the Union. Slavery was not abolished until the 13th Amendment. 13th Amendment, which was passed, let's see, I'm trying to see when the date was. I think it was in February of 1865. That was about a couple of months before Lincoln was assassinated in April of 1865. As a matter of fact, no, I'm sorry, forgive me. It was in January. It was ratified some months later. According to the reading, by the end of January 1865, both houses of Congress had passed the 13th Amendment, and it was ratified in December of 1865. Lincoln said, "It is my greatest and most enduring contribution to the history of the war." He said that about emancipation in February of 1865, just before he was assassinated, which probably had something to do with why he was assassinated. The 13th Amendment also did not abolish slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't do it, and the 13th Amendment didn't do it because it allowed for slavery for those who were in penal servitude. In other words, people who were in jail could be enslaved. Hence the reason why so many black men were picked up off the street as vagrants, because they didn't have a job, because the white folks wouldn't hire them to give them a job. So they would pick them up off the streets, take them to jail, and tell them, now you're a slave, now you got to work for free. Hello. I can hear somebody saying, Pastor Riley, you getting ready to be assassinated. No, I'm just telling you the truth is, if you look online and you take the time to research, you can find all this wonderful information for yourself. Let me make sure that's all I wanted to share with you. Oh, yes, Governor Northam. Thank God for Governor Northam. Just this past Tuesday, let me find the right reference. Yes, Tuesday, June 16th, 2020, Governor Northam declared Juneteenth a state holiday with paid leave. That's the other thing I wanted to tell you. And finally, that there has been no president, according to the records, no president who has ever endorsed making Juneteenth a national holiday, including President Barack Obama. It's not it. I love the brother. Don't misunderstand. I understand why he didn't do it. Because if you think they were gunning for him before, they really would have been gunning for him then. So somebody tell the Lord thank you. That's information overload. But I want you to, honestly and truly, I want you to go online, and I want you to read and study. There are videos, so you don't have to do a whole lot of reading, but make certain that you get them from good sources, get them from solid sources. There are videos that explain the position of the southern states, the Confederacy. There are videos that say that this was all about states' rights. That wasn't it. It was about slavery. That was the bottom line for the South. For the North, it was about not letting the southern states secede from the Union. Because the truth of the matter is, most of the wealth in the United States was in the South, because everybody had free labor. And so when you have free labor, you don't have to pay workers. Any corporation would try to pay their people as little as possible so they can keep all of the proceeds and health, and in that doing, they build their wealth. That's capitalism. That's the way it goes. You spend as little as possible to make as much as possible. That's what this great financial institution we have in the US of A is all about. But thanks be unto God. God has a way of taking what people mean in one sense and turning it around to something else. With the Emancipation Proclamation, Abraham Lincoln sought to free slaves so that they could fight, so the Union could win, so they could put the United States back together and either get rid of the slaves and send them back, or make sure that things stayed as close to what it was as possible, because nobody's talking about equality. Everybody thought black folks were stupid, they were dumb, they were less than white folks. So things would have maintained that same mindset, but God turned it around and put them in a position where they had to come up with the 13th Amendment, and made it so they had to come up with the 14th Amendment, and they had to come up with the 15th Amendment in order to make all this stuff stick. And because of them, people in the 60s were able to sue to get all the rest of the stuff changed so that we could have voting rights. Praise Jesus. And voting rights would allow us to have a voice in government so that we can make certain that the people who pull the levers and the people who run the votes, the people who take the bills to the floor to make sure they're people who have the best interests of all Americans in mind, not just those of the lighter hue. That's why we must vote. That's why your local elections and your state elections are so much more important than your federal elections. Because for everything that the current president is trying to do, he could not stop what is happening in Virginia today. He can't stop what Governor Northam is doing in Virginia. He can't have any say in what happens in the city of Norfolk unless the city of Norfolk, the state of Virginia, invites the federal government into their business. As long as what happens here doesn't go against the Constitution, Virginia can do what it chooses. And I'm grateful to God that Virginia, here again, God has taken something awful, the coronavirus and the killing of our black brothers and sisters. God has turned this thing around and fixed it so that everybody has to take a look at the health disparities in this country, has to take a look at the financial disparities in this country, has to take a look at the ability of people to even go to the store and buy groceries, have to go clean across town to get to the hospital. Taking a look at all of that, the fact that African Americans in this country have been on the bottom for the longest, they have been ignored, even with the coronavirus, as long as everybody thought, and get mad with me if you would, as long as everybody thought that it was all Americans who were really susceptible, when they started finding out that it was people of color who were the most susceptible, all of a sudden everybody wants to open everything. And everybody wants to try to get back to normal as quickly as possible because the economy is crashing. I promise you that if Caucasian Americans between the ages of 25 and 45 were dying at the rate of African Americans who are over 65, we'd still be in lockdown. Somebody tell the Lord thank you. Well, let's see what we can do. Grateful to God. I'm grateful to God that I don't owe anybody anything and I can say what the truth is. And not have to worry about anybody cutting me down. You can't shut me down. The internet is wide open. Praise be to the King. Okay, let's see about some announcements. Father's Day is Sunday, and we will indeed be celebrating the brothers of FDCC on this coming Sunday, giving God praise and thanks for all of them, for the wonderful men of the house, because God knows we have some of the finest men in the world that are part of Faith Deliverance Christian Center, and we want to celebrate them on Sunday. Not just them, but all of the men who take care of their families, who love their wives, who are good citizens, who are good brothers, who are good uncles, men who didn't even sire children, but they've raised children, they've encouraged young men, they've done things in their community that made them better, and they've lived decent lives. Not perfect lives, but decent lives with a heart towards doing what is good and what is just. We want to celebrate you on Sunday at 1 o'clock. So join us for that worship experience. Second thing I want to bring to your attention is what's going on in front of Faith Deliverance Monday through Friday. And I think they're going on next week. Somebody check with Dr. A and find out if she's going to push on for another week and let me know. I believe we are. I'll let you know for sure on Sunday. But they had a fantastic turnout this week with the Sidewalk Solidarity piece. Just let me show you this from there. Dr. A says she thinks that some folk are just glad to be out there to see somebody from Faith Deliverance, because we haven't been able to be together and worship in a long time. And again, I want to thank her for coming up with the idea and for implementing it, for going forth with it, and making a statement from our house, a statement from the people of Dorcas and the people of Faith Deliverance that we absolutely are going to pray, we're going to vote, and we are resisting. Indeed, we are. Well, that about does it for me. I am grateful to God for the chance to be with you. Got a few hugs and all that good stuff for you. So I want you to love on somebody for just a few moments. Take the time to send some people some love. You know what we do. You know how we do it. Send out the hugs. Send out the greetings. You got my hugs. I truly miss you guys. I truly miss you. And I look forward to when the Lord will allow us to come back together again to worship. But I'm not going to rush it. So, y'all just be patient. And in the meantime, just because we can't get back to the house doesn't mean we are not to be the church. Even this time in this season. If you can't do anything else, you can find a way to protest. You can find a way to make your voice heard. You can do something so that you can be a part of this move of God, because that is what it is. It's a move of God that is changing this country. It is changing this nation. And we thank God for it. That's right. Love on some folks. Love on some folks. Yeah. I see you, Sister Nisa Marsh, Sister Michael, Deacon Coley, Sister April Belton, Sister Coffee, Sister Jackie Ramsey, Sister Tate, Sister Deborah Brown, Brother Malachi, Brother Ike Johnson, Sister Julia, Sister Edith Frazier, Sister Barbara Balthazar, Sister Cannon. God bless all of you. Sister Ollie Wilson, Casey, thank you so much. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Sister Linda Sykes. Alvin Cromwell, thank you for joining us. Sister Claudia, thank you all so very much. Thank you all so very much for always being with me. Sister Cromartie and Brother Lee, way up there in the northern part, we're glad to have you with us. Sister Deidre, Sister Holmes, Sister Trotz, Sister Scott, Sister Brooks, Sister Sherelle, Cheyenne, it's my Cheyenne Michael, Tanya Green, good to see you, Tanya Green, God bless you. Sister Delphine Simon, tell me I give your husband my best. He's a good brother, good brother. Sister Jatan, thank you. TC, love you, girl. Looking forward to singing with you again. Sister Sandy, thank you. Sister Sarah Muhammad, thank you. Hey, Torian, God bless you. Sister Rose been out there every day with her camera, protesting. Brother Darrell, praying for you, my brother. Hang tough, hang tough. Deacon Linda Warren Parker, hang on in there and hold up that bloodstained banner for Jesus. I love you guys so much. I love you so very much. And I thank God for every last one of you. And thank you for loving me. Thank you so much for loving me and keeping me in your prayers. Continue to keep me in your prayers. I do pray that the grace of God will cover you. I pray that the favor of the Lord will go before you. I pray that the joy of the Lord will be your strength, and that the love of God will wrap you, will comfort you, and will hold you. And I pray that the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will keep your heart fixed and will keep your mind made up through Jesus Christ. Young adults, I see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock. If you did not get your invite, you did not get your link to Zoom, you need to contact me so I can send it to you. Looking forward to being with all of you young folks tomorrow and with everybody on Sunday at 1 o'clock p.m. God bless you.